It was a sweltering December day in Harare, the kind where the sun seemed to hang in the sky, daring you to find shade. The air carried that lazy holiday buzz, everyone scrambling to get somewhere, somehow. It's a madness unique to Zimbabwe during the Christmas season. Public transport is a joke, and the few functioning buses are stuffed with travelers holding on to everything from live chickens to oversized suitcases. That's why I prefer my own car, my aging but dependable Corolla. No chaos, no drama. This year, my wife and 2 kids had gone ahead to our holiday home in Mutare. My wife had reminded me, repeatedly, how much the kids missed me already. "They're asking about you every day," she said, during one of our calls, her tone soft, but with an edge of longing. The thought of my daughter's small hands clinging to my neck and my son's infectious laughter filled me with a deep yearning. But I stayed back to tie up a few handyman contracts. The jobs paid well around this time of year, and the extra cash never hurt. Still, by the afternoon of the 22nd, my thoughts were only of family. My wife had sent me a picture earlier, the kids playing on the grass outside the house, their faces lit with joy. I felt a pang of guilt for not being there already. Work could wait. Christmas couldn't. I packed up my toolbox, threw it in the trunk, and set off at around 4 p.m. The trip should have been straightforward. 3 hours on the road. I'd planned to be home by dinner. The first half of the drive was uneventful, but my mind kept drifting to my family. I imagined my son excitedly showing me his latest discovery. He always had a knack for finding the tiniest, most fascinating things. And my daughter's sleepy, trusting face as she hugged me tightly before bed. I had promised them I'd be there in time to read their favorite Christmas story. The thought of letting them down gnawed at me. The road stretched out like an old friend, familiar and comforting. I even stopped halfway to relieve myself at one of those bushy laybys, the kind where you always feel like someone's watching. I laughed it off, zipped up, and got back in the car. By then, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Twilight melted into darkness, and with it came that unsettling stillness unique to rural roads. About 45 minutes out from Mutare, I saw them. A woman and a little girl standing by the roadside. She waved frantically, her figure illuminated briefly by my headlights. Something about the scene tugged at my conscience. It wasn't safe for anyone to be out this late, especially not a mother and child. I thought about my own kids. If they were stranded like this, I'd hope someone would stop to help. That thought alone made me slow down and pull over. I slowed down and pulled over. "Where are you going?" I asked as I rolled down the window. Something in me hesitated, aware of the cultural implications. A man traveling alone with a woman he didn't know, especially at night, was bound to raise eyebrows, even in my own mind. "Mutare," she replied, her voice low and hoarse. She clutched the girl's hand tightly. I hesitated. "It's late. What are you still doing out here?" Her eyes met mine, dark and weary. Before she could answer, she asked, "Are you married?" The question caught me off guard. I didn't answer immediately, unsure why she would ask such a thing. Before I could respond, something caught my eye. The little girl clutched her hand tightly, but as I leaned forward for a better look, she suddenly wasn't there. I blinked, hard. "Didn't you have a baby with you?" I asked. Her face twisted into something between confusion and anger. "What baby?" she snapped. I stepped out of the car, circling it to check. Nothing. When I returned to the driver's seat, she had already let herself in, slumping into the passenger's side and dozing off almost instantly. The little girl was nowhere to be seen. The air in the car grew thick. My chest tightened as if the weight of her presence had seeped into the upholstery. The radio fizzled out into static. I fiddled with the dial, but every station was the same. A crackling void. I chalked it up to poor reception and kept driving. Still, I couldn't shake the image of that missing baby. Had I imagined the little girl? She stirred beside me, her head lolling toward my side. The atmosphere felt heavier with each passing kilometer. Though she said nothing, her silence screamed a warning. Don't ask, don't pry, just drive. Mutare was less than an hour away now. I pressed the accelerator, hoping to put this strange encounter behind me. But then, as I rounded a curve, she slumped toward me, her legs brushing against my knee. Her touch was ice cold, her eyes snapped open. "What do you want from me, sir?" she asked, her voice sharp and cutting. "You left her. Do you want to go back and find the girl, or shall we stop and make another one right here?" Her question chilled me, but my reply came out firm. "I'm a married man. I just want to get to my wife and kids." Something in her demeanor shifted. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw anger flicker across her face. "I asked you if you were married, and you didn't respond. Why?" she demanded. "Your wife," she hissed, her voice dripping with disdain. "You think she can protect you?" The question sent a jolt through me. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. "What? No, She laughed then, a low, guttural sound that didn't belong to her. Her head tilted unnaturally, her gaze pinning me to my seat. "You shouldn't have stopped," she said. My heart hammered against my ribs. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Look, I'm just trying to help you get to Mutare. That's it. I have a wife and kids waiting for me. I'm going home no matter what." Her smile stretched wider, too wide. "You are going to your kids? But where is my girl? Why did you leave her? What kind of a father are you? You call yourself a man?" Her breath now smelled of firewood smoke, rich and acrid. As she leaned closer, my surroundings began to shift. What was once a highway now stretched out like a vast flowing river, its surface shimmering unnaturally in the headlights. "I thought you said you were alone." She didn't hear this, she was fast asleep again. The road seemed to stretch endlessly ahead, the usual landmarks swallowed by an impenetrable darkness. The car's headlights barely pierced through the gloom. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. The hands hadn't moved. Panic bubbled up inside me. My breathing quickened. "Where is the little girl?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "What girl?" she replied, her tone mockingly sweet. "It's just you and me now," she said, her voice low and venomous. "No," I replied, gripping the wheel tightly. "I'm going home to my family. That's all that matters." Her face contorted, and she let out a sharp, almost animalistic growl. Yet, as I spoke, her form seemed to waver, as if the strength she projected was faltering. The air in the car grew colder, each breath a visible puff. She leaned closer, her face inches from mine. Her eyes were no longer human. They burned with an unnatural light, hollow and endless. I swerved, the car skidding onto the shoulder of the road. The jolt sent her back into her seat, her laughter echoing like a haunting melody in my ears. I slammed on the brakes and jumped out, gasping for air. The night was eerily quiet. No chirping crickets, no rustling leaves, just the oppressive silence of the river-like expanse around me. My heart pounded as I scanned the area, ready to confront her, to demand answers. But when I looked back at the car, she was gone. For what felt like minutes, I stood frozen, staring at the empty road ahead. When I finally dared to look back, the car was empty. She was gone. A strange stillness gripped the area around me. The silence pressed against my ears, and the faint smell of burnt rubber lingered in the air. My hands were trembling as I reached for my phone, hoping to call someone, anyone. But the screen flickered and went black the moment I unlocked it. That's when I noticed my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face looked pale, almost translucent, and my eyes seemed different, darker. Shaking, I forced myself back into the car and gripped the wheel tightly. My fingers felt numb. As I started the engine, I heard faint whispers from the back seat. They were soft at first, indistinct murmurs that sent chills crawling up my spine. I told myself it was the wind, though deep down I knew better. The drive to Mutare felt endless. I kept my eyes locked on the road ahead, refusing to glance at the mirrors. Every turn felt like it would reveal her suddenly reappearing, her gaze locking with mine. My palms were slick with sweat, and every shadow seemed to stretch and shift unnaturally, making my pulse quicken. Every so often, I felt a cold breeze brush the back of my neck, even though the windows were tightly shut. At one point, the headlights dimmed, plunging me into near darkness. A shadow seemed to move just beyond their reach, keeping pace with the car. As I approached a bend in the road, I saw it again. The woman and the little girl standing by the roadside. My heart nearly stopped. It couldn't be. They had vanished. I sped up, refusing to stop, refusing to look. When I finally reached the outskirts of Mutare, the city lights in the distance felt like salvation. My heart ached with the thought of my wife and kids. I imagined her worried face as she saw the time, wondering why I wasn't there yet. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, reminding myself of what mattered most: getting back to them. The whispers had stopped, and the air in the car grew lighter. But the feeling of being watched lingered, a heavy presence that refused to leave. When I pulled into the driveway of our holiday home, my daughter ran to the doorway, her small arms flung wide. "Daddy!" she yelled, her voice cutting through the remnants of my fear. My wife appeared behind her, worry etched on her face. "You look terrible," she said, her voice tinged with concern, but I barely heard her as I scooped my daughter into my arms, holding her tightly. I couldn't bring myself to explain. How could I? Even now, as I sit here recounting this, I'm not sure what I encountered on that road. But one thing haunts me more than the rest. What if I hadn't stopped? Would I have made it home unscathed, or would I have faced something worse? Perhaps the danger wasn't in the stopping, but in the road itself, a trap for the unwary, a test of resolve. Even now, the echoes of her laughter cling to me, faint but persistent, like shadows that refuse to fade. I hold my family a little closer these days, grateful for every moment, but one lesson remains etched in my mind. Some roads should never be traveled after dark, and some stops are better left unmade.